we've produced a lot of films where we talk about the sportsmanship and the camaraderie that make pro football such a great sport. Well, we're not talking about that today. No, we're here to talk about the nasty side of the game. I mean, the NFL's greatest feuds, bitter stories of irreconcilable differences, bad blood, grudges taken to the grave. And we'll start by looking at some individual players who just couldn't stand the sight of each other. And then we'll move on to entire teams who viewed the guys on the other side of the line with a collective evil eye.
I remember on the fourth down punting situation, I snapped the ball to the punter, and as soon as I brought my head up, pow! Jeez, my helmet flew off, and I saw these little black dots in the yellow thing, and I also saw the number, Woo. And I went up to him. I said, "You son of a, I'll get you."
Number 65 was Chuck Noll. The feud grew over time.
4 years later, there's Chuck Noll. Lo and behold, the game's over. Here he comes. Here he comes. He said, "Are you ready, you?" And I went, whoom. I mean, I gave him a shot, and he went down. Bert Bell fined me $500, and he said, "I want you to apologize to that boy." Now, it takes a little courage to go up to somebody when something like that happens, to say you're sorry. So I remember it took, I was waiting, and then finally I went over and I said, "I want to apologize for what happened in Philadelphia." And he came up close to me and he said, "Bold."
While Bednarik versus Noll was a feud born in the heat of battle, the dispute between the Bears' Doug Atkins and the Colts' Jim Parker was mostly a war of words.
Jim Parker had been a former boxer. He had weighed about 290 pounds, and he was as mobile as a boxer. He was strong, and there was nobody in football that could beat Jim Parker. The only way Doug knew that he could beat him is if he got Jim mad.
Doug Atkins would sometimes call Jim Parker at the hotel. The Colts were staying and chew Parker out just to get him ready for tomorrow.
I'd wake him up and we'd have a few cuss words over the phone. He's pretty good. He taught me a few words, too, I tell you.
He would talk about my grandmother, just something about my father, or just something that provoked me. And after he got me aroused, then he thought he could play better football.
I beat him a lot of times, but I'd start talking to him. And the ball be snapped, and I'd be gone.
His voice, he would just continually talk the whole ball game, yakety, yakety, yakka. You know, your grandmother didn't have but one shoe or something like that, and I would get so mad at him, and I would just fight him, and I forget about what I'm supposed to do, and what the play John done called, and the starting count and everything, and before you know it, we got a battle going.
And Parker would take off his helmet and go to the official, and he'd actually get tears in his eyes, and he'd cry, and he said, "He can't call me that. He can't call me that." And he said, "Jim, there's nothing in the rule book that says he can't call you that." He said, "We're going to have to get a rule change."
Chicago's Ed Sprinkle was a feared pass rusher in the 40s and 50s. Nicknamed the Claw, Sprinkle did whatever it took to bring down quarterbacks. But one day, he went a little too far while trying to sack Slingin' Sammy Baugh.
What he was doing, he was coming in, rushing the passer, but he'd get his hands up and whack, he'd come in like that, like he's hitting at the ball. He's rapping me in the face, and I was bleeding on both sides.
I'd hit anybody on any play as hard as I could hit them, and that's the way I played.
Well, after a little while, we came up, and there was a passing down, and they thought it was going to be a passing down anyway. And I told them, just let him come. Don't even touch him. And hell, by the time I got back 7 yards, he was pretty close to me. And I threw the ball at him, and I hit him right there in the head, and it stopped him. And he just stood there and then fell flat on his damn stomach. And it scared the living hell out of me, because I thought I might have killed the boy, you know. I didn't know he just passed out.
Most football fans recall Clint Longley, the baby-faced rookie who replaced an injured Roger Staubach to lead the Cowboys to a miraculous comeback win over Washington on Thanksgiving Day, 1974. What most fans forget is that after Longley did the impossible, he proceeded to do the unthinkable. In the summer of '76, Longley started a feud with, of all people, his teammate, Roger Staubach.
He said something about me one day, and I told him, don't ever say anything about me to any of my teammates. Say it to me with my face. And so that kind of got us started off on we were off on a bad foot out there in training camp, and we got in a little skirmish after practice one day.
Without going back into the specific incidents, we were pretty well at each other's throat at the time.
A few days later, he did something to me. He hit me from behind and just completely, I mean, he could have broke my jaw, and it was, that's exactly what happened. I mean, his story that I was facing him and saying something to him was a lie.
We didn't have anything else to do for entertainment out there, so we started fighting.
I was in the locker room. I was putting my pads on, and he hit me alongside the head from behind.
It wasn't but a one punch. Clint knocked him down, and so Roger got up, and I was holding him, and Clint ran out of the dressing room, and we calmed Roger down. We got him, he said, "Okay, I'll go see the trainer." And we were walking toward the trainer. Well, we let him into the training room, figuring he was okay. And the next thing we know, he turns around and takes off running toward the dormitory. He was going to get Longley.
I wanted to get him, and people said, well, afterwards, Roger, you professed to be this person. Why did you go after Clint after he hit you? And I kidded him. I said, well, I wanted to turn the other cheek and let him hit me again. But I wanted to get him, and I would have got him probably within that 3-day period when I was completely incoherent. I mean, I had 10 stitches in my eye, and of course, he left immediately, ran, and I've never seen him since that day.
Reflecting on it, it's kind of unlikely that it happened. You look back, you say, really had nothing against him. It had nothing to do with football. Something that developed over a very short period of time. And, for my part, if nothing else, it gave me some perspective because it sent me to San Diego.
Why he did it, I don't know if he's told anybody.
Looking back on it, you don't have an explanation for something like that.
Who's the soapbox derby king? Who's the soapbox derby king?
And now, Greatest Feuds returns with the NFL's answer to the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Programs here, the NFL's oldest rivalry, Packers and Bears. Programs, $2.
This is what football's all about. Let's break on win. Let's break on win. 1, 2, 3, win.
What's the split, Peter?
Anderson cutting it back on the outside.
No NFL teams have played each other more than the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers. It's the league's longest-running rivalry, a heated matchup that involves fans, friends, and families.
The only thing we don't agree on are two things. One, I'm a Packer fan. I live in Manitowoc. And I'm a Bear fan. I live in the Chicago area. The other thing is, I think light beer is less filling, and I think it tastes great. Go Bears! Go Pack!
The bruising beginning occurred in 1921 when the Packers played the Chicago Staleys, who became the Chicago Bears 1 year later. The tone for this rivalry was set right from the start when Chicago guard John Tarzan Taylor's sneak punch broke the nose of Packer tackle Howard Cub Buck. 8 decades later, this bitter series is just as intense.
When we played the Bears, all holes were barred. You didn't care what happened. You could have a complete losing season, but if you beat the Bears, that was your season.
There's not only a rivalry between the teams, those two cities don't like each other, especially the fans.
This antagonism is born of geography as well as longevity, for Wisconsin and Illinois are bordering states. In the early days, Packers fans bordered the sidelines of claustrophobic East Stadium, where on one memorable occasion, this unique kind of neighborly involvement led to an even weirder family affair.
After I started wrestling, I got married to a girl from Boston, and we used to sit on I'd sit on right at the end of the bench with the players, and my wife would sit next to me. And one time we were losing like 35 to 42, and they kicked off to Green Bay. The Green Bay player ran right by me, and I looked for my wife, and I couldn't believe it. She was out running with the player. And they were missing the tackles right along the sideline. Anyway, he went in for a touchdown. She went in for a touchdown. And all the Andy Frayne ushers who handled the ball game there at Wrigley Field in Chicago, they all came in. We had a big fight. They threw my wife and I onto the street there. So even my wife's been involved in some terrific struggles there at Green Bay.
In the early years, Green Bay did indeed struggle. Their games with Chicago were fiercely fought, but the Bears usually won. For these were George Halas's monsters of the Midway, the kings of pro football.
Come on, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Excellent.
Then came the Lombardi era of the 60s. They were the glory days of Horning, Taylor, and Starr, where the pack swept all opponents from their path. With 5 championships and 2 Super Bowl victories, Lombardi's team ruled the NFL. George Halas was exasperated.
There comes a knock on the door in the training room, and it's Papa Bear. And the equipment man answers the door. He said, "Yes, Coach, can I help you?" He says, "Yes, I'd like to speak to Coach Lombardi. It's very urgent." Now, this is 5 minutes before the game, and he walks in, and here are the 2 coaches by themselves. He says, "Yes, Coach, can I help you?" And he says, "Yeah." He said, "Vince, I just want you to know you better have your team ready because we're going to kick your ass."
It was such a hatred kind of a deal. We looked forward to it all year long. It was a clipping, biting, scratching type of contest.
There are going to be some late hits thrown, probably some cheap shots thrown, some dirty shots thrown, but we know that's a part of the game. We play the Bears.
I've carried a Packer grudge for a long time. Actually, I got a scar from the Packers right here when Tim Harris hit me and separated my shoulder.
The ugliest incident occurred in 1986 when Charles Martin's terry cloth hit list included Jim McMahon's number.
I think a lot of guys were shocked, when it actually happened, not only our sideline, but their sideline. It was like it was slow motion because the play was pretty much over, and I remember Martin grabbed him and almost souffled him with a wrestling move and just threw him right on his bad shoulder.
A counterpoint to Martin's villainy was Refrigerator Perry, who in 1985 briefly took center stage, an unlikely weapon that allowed Mike Ditka to pour salt into his arch-rival's wounds.
Hand off to Perry, crashes right side.
The Fridge became a cult hero, and the Bears went on to Super Bowl 20. But in 1989, Ditka's bubble burst with double defeats to the Pack, including one by a single point on a controversial instant replay reversal.
Come on, Magic. Come on, Magic. Come on now.
On 4th and goal from the 14th. Bukowski looking, now stepping up, on the run. He's going to have to throw in the end zone. Throw it on, and touchdown! Sterling Sharp, he caught it!
After further review, we have a reversal. Touchdown!
When it was determined Packer quarterback Don Bukowski had not been over the line of scrimmage on the winning pass, the Bears were losers. Ditka was so incensed over the 14-13 defeat, he ordered the Bears' public relations staff to put an asterisk next to the score in Chicago's media guide. It's an ironic footnote to an autumn ritual that is the NFL's longest continuing saga, the storied battles between the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears, and the players who through the years have made it the great rivalry it is today.
I'd like to show you something here.
DirecTV or Prime Star to subscribe to ESPN Full Court.
Now, back to greatest feuds and a rivalry that shook the 70s.
2 blue-collar cities together against each other with good, tough football games. And you know, when you play the Steelers, you better have your chin strap buttoned.
The most fun I've ever had in my life was playing against the Oakland Raiders. To me, that was what football was all about.
My arms and the back of my neck, I get goosebumps as they boo us so bad. It was fueled by the hatred for each other, fueled by wanting to go to the Super Bowl, and it just exploded.
After After the immaculate reception, the Steelers wilted in the heat of their battles with the Raiders. They lost 3 straight to Oakland, including the 1973 AFC wildcard game. The team was groping for guidance, especially number 12 quarterback Terry Bradshaw. Bradshaw was benched before the Oakland game early in the 1974 season. But one man finally came along with some advice for Bradshaw and the Steelers, and he shifted the balance of power back to Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh started Joe Gilliam in the game, and we beat him something like 17-0. After the game, Terry Bradshaw said to me, "Can you get me out of here? Can you trade for me?" And I said to him, "Listen, I love you. I got enough problems. I can't get you, but let me put in a good word for you." Chuck Noll had been a close friend, and probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done, said to him, "Why the hell don't you play Bradshaw and stop playing Gilliam? Bradshaw can win for you." He put Bradshaw back in the lineup. They went on for that incredible run, and we had our hands full with the Steelers from then on, because good me raised his hand and suggested that they ought to start Bradshaw.
Al Davis may have pushed his rivals in the right direction. But as the two teams moved toward a rematch in the 1974 AFC Championship game, another Raider would utter the words that pushed the Steelers too far.
The Raiders had played Miami Dolphins. John Madden, at the time was the coach, said that the best 2 teams in the National Football League had played today, and this was the Super Bowl. Tuesday when we met, Chuck said, it was said that the Super Bowl was played this past Sunday. And the best 2 teams played in that game. He said, "Well, fellas, I want to tell you that the best team in the National Football League is in this league." They didn't have a chance that day. Bottom line is they didn't have a chance.
The Steelers used 21 fourth-quarter points to snatch away the game after Oakland had led 13-3. Pittsburgh's 24-13 win humbled the confident Raiders in front of their home crowd. Oakland would have to wait a full year for the chance to get even.
Turn to greatest feuds and the vendetta between the men of steel and the men in black.
In the 1975 Conference Championship game, the plot thickened around a curious pattern of ice and a dubious new character, groundskeeper Dirt DiNardo.
The night before that game, this mysterious tear was in the taunt, and we go back the next day and it's frozen. The field is frozen. The only place that's not frozen is between the 2 hash marks.
Our game was the throw-in, the deep ball. Mel Blount, if there's one player he dreaded, it was Clifford Branch, but they all dreaded Clifford Branch. So with that ice, we had to move those receivers in, and that narrowed the field for us. I'll never forget Pete Rozelle said to me, "Well, it's the same for both sides." I said, "Damn it, Pete, you don't even understand what you're talking about. It's not the same for both sides."
The Steelers won 16-10 as the ice along the sideline neutralized Cliff Branch. But safety George Atkinson, number 43, and the Raiders did manage to find their own way to take care of Pittsburgh's leading receiver, Lynn Swann.
You know, we never go out on the field with the intentions of trying to hurt anyone, but we go out with the intentions of getting our job done. And if he don't want to get hit, his best bet is not to show up when we play Sunday, because I guarantee he will get hit.
Swan's going to be thinking about us. He knows we're back there, and he knows anytime he comes in my area or George's area to catch a ball or attempt to catch a ball, he's going to get hit, and he's going to get hit hard. But I think, you know, he's a professional athlete, too, and he's going to have a job to do. If he can't, they're going to have to replace him with somebody else. And he knows this, and I know this. In the past, he's done a lot of mouthing off, but personally, I think he's more interested in being an announcer than he is a football player.
The Raiders secondary, you know, as a group, attempted to intimidate people by playing on the fringe of what was legal and beyond the fringe. And I'll tell you that as a fact. What you had to do as a receiver is not let that bother you.
I think George has proven himself and what kind of a person he is as far as his play on the field. My concentration will be on catching the ball and winning and going back to Pasadena.
On opening day 1976, on a running play, George Atkinson struck the rivalry's most vicious blow.
The real bitterness, the George Atkinson situation, where George Atkinson came up behind Lynn Swann and felled him with a blow when Swann was downfield and was not even the guy the ball was being thrown to. The bitterness was really bad then between these two teams.
I'm telling you, whenever you end up with the Steelers and the Raiders, you're going to have a tough football game. Everyone's going to be angry when it's all said and done, and eventually someone's going to get sued about it.
After that game, Steelers coach Chuck Noll called Atkinson a criminal. Atkinson claimed he was slandered and filed a $2 million lawsuit against Noll to repair his good name. Atkinson's claim was thrown out of court.
It was such a joke. You got those maniacs over there, and we were too rough for them. Give me a break.
Ultimately, the teams took their feud back to the field, where the fight had never been about name-calling, but about pride and the league's two best teams playing championship football.
The 2 Super Bowls that they went to were through Oakland, through us. They beat us both times. We just couldn't take it anymore. It was like we were going to leave it out there. If we don't win that day, forget the season. And here comes the Steelers all cocky. And we wanted them.
The Steelers had to play the 1976 AFC title game without Franco Harris and Rocky Bleier, and the Raiders took full advantage of the circumstances. The best the Steelers' defense could do was to keep the score down to Oakland 24, Pittsburgh 7.
The biggest heartbreak that I ever had on a football field. I remember making the comment after the game was over. I said, just give me a six-pack and about a half an hour rest. Let's go out and play him again. So I think we can beat him.
After the 1976 championship game, the feud subsided. The rancor had turned into respect. But if memories of the NFL's greatest feud still cause the heart to skip a beat, it's just a little of the old bad blood still pumping.
Pretty much their guys got old and our guys got older, and it ended. But boy, was it fun. And I go to Pittsburgh now, and I love to sell to these people because all those Steeler fans and all those office buildings, and when I just go in there and I show them this ring, and I show them the score on the side of this ring. Al Davis put 24-7, Raiders 24, Steelers 7 on the ring. That's how much we hate the Steelers.
ESPN welcomes you to the following presentation of the National Football League.
This is the Great Gatsby come to life. The great playboy of the Western world.
He was a rogue, he was a scoundrel.
He had the gals, he had the limousines, $1,000 suits. We were a partying team.
His tipping and his spending was legendary.
All the true signs of a compulsive gambler. They don't build the casinos, he still owns the team.
Like he says, I've been rich and I've been poor, and rich is a lot better.
He won good, but he lost real hard. There's only one Leonard Toast.
The high life and hard times of former Philadelphia Eagles owner Leonard Toews, today on NFL Films Presents.